First, though, let's just return to our earlier story about the car explosion at the US-Canada border. Joining me live in the Perth studio is Gordon Flake, who's the CEO of the Perth USAsia Centre. Gordon, good to see you. Thanks for your time. Such an awful incident. The vision is pretty terrifying to watch of this car speeding up to the border at high speed, but plenty of relief, obviously, that this wasn't a terror incident. I guess it just shows that the world is really a bit on edge at the moment, the fact that everyone jumped to that terrorism conclusion straight away.
No, absolutely. I've been to that border crossing many, many times. Pre 9/11, one barely had to stop at all. But you've highlighted the danger that we face in our world today is that we do tend to jump to conclusions, particularly with the ongoing war in Gaza, with concerns about Ukraine. We're just kind of waiting for that next shoe to drop. And so while there's obviously a sense of tragedy in the loss of those two lives, and we don't seem to know the details yet, there's also a tremendous sense of relief that it wasn't what we feared, because there does seem to be an environment right now that would be conducive to that.
The Niagara Falls mayor told us last hour that the working theory there at the moment is it could be a health incident, but obviously investigations are now underway. Gordon, I did want to ask you about this incident that we've been reporting on in recent days involving the Chinese Navy and Australian divers, and the Navy using sonar pulses which injured an Australian diver. Our Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, has been under pressure over his handling of this incident. We've seen in an interview with my colleague Annalise Nielsen today, Kevin Rudd, the US Ambassador for Australia, has been defending the Prime Minister's conduct here, pointing out that diplomacy is, by its nature, needs to be diplomatic and it's delicate, and that world leaders don't often expose everything that they've discussed in private meetings. Should Anthony Albanese have been a bit more transparent, though, around this particular incident?
So diplomacy also means not everybody says the same thing. We had a very robust statement out from the Minister of Defense, Richard Marles. I was heartened this week that we've got some condemnation of this from Japan, a very important party. We have both our Minister of Defense and our Minister of Foreign Affairs in India for these 2+2 meetings, and there was a statement that came out there which referred to that as well. So, this idea of building international support to condemn these types of activities is itself diplomacy itself. I know that there are some here that would love to just feel satisfied for calling a spade, that probably took great pleasure to see Joe Biden responding to a question saying, well, yes, Xi Jinping is a dictator. But the question is, once you feel good having said that, what next? And so we don't know what happened in private. Again, diplomacy doesn't mean that you're using kind of a bullhorn to say these things. The question is, does a public condemnation of Xi Jinping advance Australia's interest now, or who does the saying? And so that's clearly the issues that the government is wrestling with right now, and it's not unique to Australia. Every government faces those same challenges.
Plenty of interesting comments from Ambassador Rudd in this interview with Annalise Nielsen today. One is around Taiwan, and he seemed to be suggesting that we shouldn't assume that Australia would rush to the US's side if there is a conflict in Taiwan and the US intervenes. Is that, again, just diplomatic speak?
Well, no, I mean, he's right that you shouldn't assume, because anyone's response to what happens in Taiwan really depends on the scenario. But increasingly, treaty allies of the United States, like the Philippines, like Japan, like Korea, like Australia, would face a fundamentally changed world order. And you have to remember that there are an awful lot of Australian citizens. Increasingly now, all the Australian journalists that used to be in China are now based out of Taiwan, as there are Japanese and Korean and other international citizens all in Taiwan. So if we talk about it in the abstract, you can say, sure, don't assume they'd be involved. But when the shooting starts, or hopefully it never does, but if it does start, all of a sudden the political dynamics shift dramatically. And so I think you just need to take those things with a big grain of salt.
Gordon Flake, always appreciate your time. Thank you.
Pleasure.